The Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Child Protection. Has the Minister read any of the submissions to the Legislative Council Select Committee inquiry into the Children and Young People Safety and Support Bill 2024, and if so, which submissions?
The Minister for Child Protection.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you very much for the question to the now Deputy Leader, who I think now has 5 or 6 portfolios, Mr Speaker. However, Mr Speaker, Mr Speaker, all of these portfolios and not one policy for the child protection and family support system. Not one, Mr Speaker. In contrast, Mr Speaker, in this absolutely complex area of child protection and family support, we are just beginning to see change. I'm so pleased that in the most recent report on government services released just last week, it showed that South Australia is now leading the nation in providing permanent, stable homes for children and young people leaving out of home care. In the latest ROLS data, also, we are slowing the growth in terms of the number of children and young people coming into care. We have had a net increase in carers and in workers in the system. It speaks to our $580 million investment into the system. Our family group conferencing investment is delivering in terms of around 90% of families who go through that process able to safely care for their children and young people. They are really important reforms, Mr Speaker, but we have more to do, and that is why I have introduced, and that has passed this place, supported by the Deputy Leader and without amendment, has passed this place the new Children and Young People Safety and Support Bill. Through that process of developing that bill, in reviewing the current legislation, Mr Speaker, we heard from around 1,000 people and organisations who provided significant feedback that informed the development of that bill. In our further consultation processes, we have received further feedback to inform that process going forward. What I would say, Mr Speaker, amongst all of those submissions, what we see is a complexity of views, because this area of public policy is really challenging, and there are differing views from birth families, carer families, the children and young people themselves who I've spoken with directly, various people in the sector from Aboriginal community-controlled organisations. There is a diversity of views, Mr Speaker, and in developing legislation and taking account of those views, we know that you develop legislation that takes us forward, that will help to improve the safety and well-being of children and young people. We also know that that diversity of views will continue to exist as we progress that bill and as we continue with the determination that we have on our program of reform. I've been listening, I'll keep listening, and I look forward to debate in the upper house.
Deputy Leader.
Mr Speaker, my question again to the Minister for Child Protection. When did the Minister last speak with Belinda Valentine? With your leave, sir, and that of the House, I'll explain.
Leave is sought. Is leave granted?
Yes, sir.
Belinda Valentine has today written to all members of Parliament criticising consultation processes undertaken by the government. She said, and I quote, "If you're going to ask people with lived experience what they think, really listen. Don't just tick a box and move on." I engaged in the recent consultation at first, but I stopped when it became clear it was another box-ticking exercise, unquote.
The Minister for Child Protection.
Thank Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I have a great deal of respect for Belinda Valentine, and she and I have had a number of conversations about reform in the child protection and family support system, and I appreciate her views, and I appreciate the views of all of that diverse group of stakeholders that I just spoke about. One of the things that I have done since coming to government, Mr Speaker, is to establish for the very first time ever in South Australia, and many other jurisdictions are looking with interest to what we are doing here in this space, I have established a direct experience group. That means that I hear directly from families who have been involved in the child protection and family support system. The group is supported by the incredible people at the Riley Foundation, who've also made submissions about the content of the legislation, and they've made submissions taking account of people with direct experience of the child protection and family support system. And as I have with all of the submissions, I've looked carefully at those. I want to commend the bravery of Belinda and those people on the direct experience group, and indeed many others with that direct experience who choose to speak up and advocate with courage, sometimes after going through the most heartbreaking circumstances that we can imagine. At the most recent Child Protection and Family Support Symposium, which I extended an invitation to the Shadow Minister to for the second year in a row, unfortunately he couldn't be there for that discussion. For the very first time, a really special thing happened, and that was that carer families and birth families actually spoke together on a panel. And the significance of that is that anything that happens in the child protection and family support system often encompasses a situation where there is heartbreak for one family and happiness for another, and there is always this balance and difficult situation to navigate, situations that we always navigate with children and young people at the centre of our hearts and minds. But carer families and birth families actually spoke on this panel together, and they spoke about, with such courage again, about how important it was for them to hear from one another, for them to listen to each of their perspectives as we go forward toward reform. And Mr Speaker, I think about them when I say this. I am committed to doing exactly that. I will listen. I have been listening. I will continue to listen to that broad spectrum of views about child protection and family support. I finished.
Leader.
So,
Go, straightforward question. When did the Minister last speak with Belinda Valentine? The Minister needs to stop debating, needs to answer the question.
The Minister says that she's finished her answer. Supplementary.
Rising from the answer, has the Minister spoken to Belinda Valentine since Belinda Valentine wrote to all parliamentarians in the terms that I've described to the House?
The Minister.
I haven't spoken to Belinda Valentine today, but I have spoken with her many times, and I appreciate the conversations, the in-depth conversations that we have had. And as I said, I've spoken with Ms Valentine. I respect her. I appreciate her views. I appreciate the views of a diverse group of people with direct experience of the child protection and family support system. I've been listening. I'll keep listening. I note that the Shadow Minister did not have any amendments when the bill he refers to passed through this House. No amendments whatsoever. No amendments here in this House. I presume that there won't be any from those opposite in the Legislative Council, but I look forward to those amendments that I understand may come from the crossbench and to considering them. Of course we will.
Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Speaker. My question again, the Minister for Child Protection. What advice, if any, has the Minister received from the Guardian for Children and Young People, the Commissioner for Aboriginal Children and Young People, and the Commissioner for Children and Young People in relation to legislative reform? And when did the Minister last meet with these stakeholders? With leave, sir, in that House, I'll explain.
Orders, leave granted.
A letter to members of the Legislative Council dated 25 November 2024 and co-signed by all three stakeholders said, and I quote, "As experts in this field and on behalf of children and young people in South Australia, we have substantive advice and evidence to provide government on required legislative reform. To date, our advice and evidence has not been heeded," unquote.
Again, thank you.
The Minister, is this the legislation that came through this morning and is still before the House?
No.
No, different legislation.
No,
The
Mr.
Minister.
Speaker. So again, this legislation is very complex. Firstly, I have had a number of meetings with each of the stakeholders that the Shadow Minister, Deputy Leader speaks about. I've had a number of meetings with each of those parties, of course I have, and many discussions about issues pertaining to the child protection and family support system. And one of the issues, because there are so many complex issues in this bill that it will be very difficult to take the Shadow Minister through each of them in addition to the briefing I've already given him about this bill. One of the areas I would focus on is in relation to advice received from the Commissioner for Aboriginal Children and Young People in line with the report, her holding on to our future report that was tabled in this House. One of the things that is recommended and that she turns her mind to in that report is the application of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander child placement principle and how we could embed in legislation the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander child placement principle to the standard of active efforts, something that has been long discussed by SNAKE, the Commissioner for Aboriginal Children and Young People, and a range of other stakeholders. So for instance, in relation to that particular element, that is in this legislation, very clearly a centrepiece of this legislation. There are other issues that have been raised by those stakeholders, and I look forward to our continuing discussions with them beyond the passage of this legislation.